The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the empty space between star systems like a small metal moon. Ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at its many ports every day. Today was special, though, because the Galactic Council was meeting and every major species in the galaxy had sent someone important to be there. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the long hallways of the station toward the main meeting room. His black uniform looked simple compared to the fancy clothes and armor that other species wore. Behind him walked 3 other humans, but they all looked ordinary too. Jake carried a small case in his hand, and his face showed no emotion as alien beings stared at him from every direction. The meeting room was huge with seats, arranged in a circle that went up many levels. Each species had their own section, with special air and gravity to keep them comfortable. The humans sat in a small area near the bottom, while the more powerful species took the higher seats. To show how important they were, Commander Veltar from the Zephyrian Empire sat in one of the highest places. His body looked like it was made of blue crystal, and when he spoke a machine changed his words into sounds other species could understand. He looked down at the humans with what might have been a smile if crystals could smile. The meeting started. Like all the others with reports about trade and small fights between different worlds, Jake waited patiently as hours passed and various species complained about their neighbors or asked for help with their problems. Finally, the council leader called his name. Jake stood up and walked to the center of the room where everyone could see him. The talking stopped, and thousands of eyes focused on the single human standing below them. He opened his case and took out a simple piece of paper. For 50 years, humanity has been part of this council, Jake said in a calm voice that carried clearly through the room. We have followed your rules and helped with your conflicts when asked. We sent small groups of ships when you needed military help. We shared some of our technology when you asked for it. We tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons, whenever possible. Some of the aliens nodded as if they approved, but most just listened without showing any feeling. Jake continued speaking. During this time, many of you have seen human ships in battle and judged our military power based on what you saw. You have decided that humans are weak because our weapons seem simple and our ships looked basic compared to yours. Commander Veltar made a sound like breaking glass, which his translator turned into laughter. The human speaks truth. Your species barely qualified to join this council. Your technology is hundreds of years behind the great empires. Your ships are slow and your weapons are weak. Jake looked up at the crystal being without any anger on his face. You are correct that what you have seen of human military power appears weak. What you do not understand is that this was a choice we made, deliberately. The room became very quiet. Even species that had been talking among themselves stopped to listen. Jake folded the paper and put it back in his case. Every ship humanity has sent to help with galactic conflicts operated under what we call police action rules. These rules limit our weapons to the lowest power needed to complete a mission. They limit our ship designs to basic models that will not frighten other species. They require us to use the minimum force necessary and to always look for peaceful solutions first. War Chief Grozek from the Hegemony Empire stood up on his platform. He was 3 times taller than Jake, and his thick arms could probably crush a human without effort. You speak of holding back power. You do not have little human. The Hegemony has fought your people many times. We know exactly how weak you are. Jake nodded as if he agreed. You are right that you know exactly how strong the forces we sent to fight you were. What you do not know is why we chose to send such weak forces when we could have sent much stronger ones. The Altarian representative named Kethron leaned forward in his seat. His blue skin looked almost human, except for the extra arms and the way his eyes glowed with inner light. What are you trying to tell us, human? I am here to inform the council that Earth has decided to change its approach to galactic conflicts, Jake said. His voice stayed calm, but somehow it seemed to carry more weight than before. The attacks on civilian populations by the Hegemony Empire have increased every month for the past year. The slave raids by the Collective have taken millions of innocent people from their homes. The territorial wars started by the Alliance have destroyed entire solar systems. Jake paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from each of the species he had named. None of them looked away, but some seemed uncomfortable. Humanity has tried to solve these problems through diplomacy and limited military action for 50 years. This approach has failed. Too many innocent people are dying while we follow rules that our enemies ignore. Therefore, the Earth government has voted to remove the restrictions on our military forces. The room exploded with noise as hundreds of different species all started talking at once. Some sounded angry, while others seemed confused or even amused. War Chief Grozak's voice boomed over all the others. "Are you threatening us, tiny human? Do you think your pathetic ships can challenge the might of the great empires?" Jake waited for the noise to die down before answering. "I am not threatening anyone. I am informing you of a change in human policy. As of tomorrow, our forces will no longer operate under police action rules. Admiral Lisa Carter will replace me as military liaison between Earth and the Council. I strongly suggest that you review your historical files about human warfare before taking any aggressive actions." Commander Veltar's crystal body flashed with what his species used instead of laughter. "Historical files about human warfare? Your species has barely left its home system. What history could possibly concern the great powers of the galaxy? Earth fought a global war less than 200 years ago," Jake said. "In 6 years, that war killed over 70 million humans using technology that you would consider primitive. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single bomb. We built machines that could cross oceans underwater without being detected. We created codes that your best computers today still cannot break." The room became quieter as some of the older species began to look thoughtful. Jake continued. "That was when our population was less than 3 billion, and our technology was limited to one planet. Today, humanity controls dozens of star systems with a population over 200 billion. Our technology has advanced considerably since then." Jake picked up his case and turned toward the exit. "Admiral Carter will arrive tomorrow with a full diplomatic team. They will be available to discuss peaceful solutions to current conflicts with any species that wishes to avoid military confrontation." As the human delegation walked toward the door, War Chief Grozak called after them. "Your threats do not frighten the hegemony human. We will continue our campaigns as we see fit." Jake stopped at the doorway and looked back one last time. "Then you will discover why we were holding back." The humans left the chamber, and most of the alien species immediately began arguing about what they had heard. Some laughed at human arrogance, while others demanded military action against Earth for making threats. A few of the older and wiser species sat quietly and began accessing their computer systems to learn more about human history. In the Keeper archives deep in the station, an ancient being named Zephani began searching through files that had not been opened for decades. What she found in the old records about human military capabilities made her very concerned about what might happen next. 3 weeks passed after Admiral Morrison left the Galactic Council meeting, and most species had already forgotten about his warning. The great empires continued their usual activities of conquering weaker civilizations and taking what they wanted. War Chief Grozak of the Hegemony decided it was time to teach the humans a lesson about making threats they could not back up. The human colony called New Boston orbited a yellow star about 40 light years from Earth. The planet had forests and oceans like the human homeworld, and about 12 million people lived there, in cities that looked peaceful and undefended. Intelligence reports said the colony had only a small defense force with maybe 10 ships total. Grozak assembled 30 of his best dreadnoughts for the attack. Each ship was over 2 kilometers long, with enough firepower to destroy a moon. The hegemony fleet had never lost a battle against any force smaller than 50 ships, and they expected this to be an easy victory that would send a message to Earth about respecting superior powers. Captain Ben Parker commanded the defense force, protecting New Boston from his ship called the UNS Defiant. The ship looked like a simple destroyer, about 400 meters long, with basic weapons and shields. Parker was 45 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. His crew of 200 worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the coming fight. "Captain, we have incoming ships on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Kate Johnson from her position at the communications console. She was young with short brown hair and had joined the Space Force only 3 years earlier. 30 large vessels approaching at high speed. Parker nodded and activated the ship-wide announcement system. "All hands, this is the captain. Hostile fleet approaching. Battle stations." Throughout the ship, crews moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. In the engineering section, Chief Rodriguez checked the power systems while weapons teams loaded the torpedo tubes. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Amy Davis took her place at the tactical station and began analyzing the approaching enemy ships. "Sir, the lead ship is sending a transmission," Kate announced. "Put it on screen," Parker ordered. The main display showed War Chief Grozak's massive face with its thick bone ridges and small red eyes. His voice was deep and threatening as he spoke in the hegemony language, which the ship's computer translated. "Immediately. Human weaklings of New Boston, you are now under attack by the glorious hegemony empire. Your pathetic defenses cannot stop us. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will make your entire population suffer before we take them as slaves." Parker stood up from his command chair and straightened his uniform. "Open a channel to all ships in the system." "Channel open, sir," Kate replied. "Citizens of New Boston, this is Captain Parker of the Defense Force. Please remain in your emergency shelters. This situation will be resolved shortly." He paused and looked at the tactical display, showing the enemy fleet getting closer. "All ships in the Defense Force, you are cleared to engage using unrestricted rules of engagement." Lieutenant Commander Davis looked up from her station with surprise. "Sir, did you say unrestricted rules?" "That is correct. As of today, we are no longer operating under police action limitations." Parker sat back down and studied the enemy formation. It seems Earth finally decided to stop playing games. The 8 human ships spread out into a defensive formation around the planet. Compared to the massive hegemony dreadnoughts, they looked like small toys that could be crushed without effort. Grozak opened communications again to mock the humans before destroying them. 8 tiny ships against 30 dreadnoughts? You humans are even more foolish than we thought. This will be over in minutes. War Chief Grozak, you have entered Sol, territory without permission, and threatened civilian populations. Parker said in a calm professional voice. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your ships and leave this system. Grozak's laughter filled the communication channel. Or what little human? Your weapons cannot even scratch our shields. Or we stop holding back, Parker replied simply. The transformation began immediately. The 8 human ships that had looked like ordinary destroyers suddenly changed in ways that made no sense. Their hulls began to shimmer and fade as advanced stealth systems activated. Energy readings that had seemed normal jumped to impossible levels that made the ship sensors scream warnings. What is happening? Grozak demanded as his weapons officer reported that the human ships were disappearing from targeting systems. Engaging. Quantum stealth mode, announced Lieutenant Commander Davis from her station. All enemy ships locked onto target. The first hegemony dreadnought simply vanished. One moment it was there, firing its massive plasma cannons, and the next moment there was empty space where a 2-kilometer-long warship had been floating. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. The ship and its crew of 8,000 warriors just stopped existing. Impossible, Grozak whispered as his sensors tried to understand what had happened. Quantum displacement successful, Davis reported. Enemy vessel relocated to coordinates approximately 4.7 light-years away in empty space. 3 more hegemony ships disappeared in the same way as strange beams of energy reached out from the invisible human vessels. The beams did not look like any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. They seemed to bend space itself around the target ships before making them vanish completely. "We call them erasers," Parker explained over the communication channel as if he was discussing the weather. "They do not destroy your ships or kill your crews. The quantum displacement system moves the target to a safe location in empty space. Your people are alive, but they will need rescue ships to get home." Grozak tried to order his remaining ships to retreat, but found that space around his fleet had become strange and thick like liquid. The hegemony ships could barely move as invisible force fields held them in place. "Gravity well generators active," reported Chief Rodriguez from engineering. "Enemy fleet trapped and unable to achieve escape velocity." "How is this possible?" Grozak demanded. "Our intelligence reports said human ships were weak and primitive." "Your intelligence was correct," Parker answered. "The ships you fought before were using police action technology designed to minimize casualties and avoid frightening other species. Today, we are using our actual military hardware." More hegemony ships vanished as the human vessels continued their attack. The erasers worked faster than any weapon system in galactic history and seemed to ignore all known defensive technologies. Shields, armor, and even reality itself offered no protection against beams that could relocate matter through space and time. "Impossible," one of Grozak's officers reported. "The human ships are multiplying. Sensors show 16 vessels now instead of 8. Lieutenant Commander Davis smiled at her station. "Quantum Fabricators Online Captain, manufacturing additional units from local stellar matter. Each of our ships carries construction systems that can build new vessels in real time," Parker explained to the increasingly panicked hegemony fleet. "We have been studying galactic military doctrine for 50 years. We know exactly how every species fights and exactly how to counter every weapon and defense system you have ever developed." Within 20 minutes, 27 of the 30 hegemony dreadnoughts had been erased to distant locations in space. The 3 remaining ships, including Grozak's flagship, found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had somehow grown from 8 to over 30 during the battle. "This is not possible," Grozak said, but his voice had lost its threatening tone. "Our ships are the most powerful in the galaxy. We have conquered hundreds of worlds." "Your ships are powerful compared to most galactic civilizations," Parker agreed. "But humanity is not most galactic civilizations. We have been deliberately limiting ourselves to avoid upsetting the balance of power. That restriction has now been removed." The human ships moved closer to the 3 surviving hegemony vessels, with their weapons still charged but not firing. Parker opened a final communication to the defeated War Chief. "War Chief Grozak, you and your remaining ships are free to leave this system. Please inform your government that any future attacks on human civilian populations will result in similar responses. We prefer not to fight, but we will protect innocent people when necessary." "What about our other ships?" Grozak asked quietly. "Rescue coordinates are being transmitted to your fleet command. Standard hyperspace travel will get recovery." Ships to your people within a few days. As I said, we relocated them, not destroyed them. The 3 remaining hegemony ships slowly turned and began the journey home, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The 30 human ships watched them leave, then began to fade from sensors as they returned to stealth mode. All ships report status, Parker requested. UNS Guardian operational, came the first reply. UNS Ranger operational, came the second. One by one, all 30 ships reported that they had taken no damage and suffered no casualties. The most one-sided military defeat in galactic history was over, and humanity had not lost a single person. Captain, Kate said from her communications station, "We are receiving priority messages from Earth, Command, and also from about 40 different species requesting immediate diplomatic contact." Parker nodded and settled back in his command chair. News of the hegemony defeat spread through the galaxy faster than the fastest ships could travel. Species that had never paid attention to humans suddenly wanted to know everything about Earth and its military capabilities. The 3 surviving hegemony ships brought back stories that seemed impossible, but the missing 27 dreadnoughts proved the stories were true. General Frank Collins sat in the command center buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean on Earth. A facility had been built in secret over 30 years and contained technology that would have amazed even the most advanced galactic civilizations. Holographic displays showed human military operations across dozens of star systems as the new unrestricted policy went into effect. "Status report, Colonel," Collins said to his chief of staff as he entered the main tactical room. Colonel Rita Martinez stood before a massive 3-dimensional map showing the entire galaxy with red markers indicating ongoing human operations. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes who had helped plan Earth's military strategy for over a decade. "The collective attempted slave raids on 3 human colonies yesterday, sir," she reported. "Admiral Steve Turner's task force intercepted 4 slaver fleets before they reached populated areas. Total enemy ships engaged was 68 capital vessels." "Casualties?" Collins asked. "0 human casualties. Enemy vessels were disabled using quantum disruption weapons, and crews were relocated to rehabilitation facilities on Luna. Medical teams report that most of the slavers were themselves former slaves who had been forced into service by their commanders." Collins nodded and studied the tactical display. The collective had built their entire civilization on capturing people from weaker species and forcing them to work in terrible conditions. Their own crews were often victims who had no choice but to follow orders or die. What about the Alliance territorial expansion? Admiral Carol Phillips engaged their main battle fleet near the Vega system. 36 Alliance capital ships were disabled and crews evacuated before any planetary bombardments could begin. "We are currently towing their vessels to impound facilities in the asteroid belt." The display showed a long line of captured alien warships being pulled through space by human vessels toward processing stations hidden among the rocks between Mars and Jupiter. Each enemy ship would be studied completely before being either returned to its home government or converted into something more peaceful. Any word from their governments? The Alliance Council has requested immediate diplomatic talks. The collective leadership is demanding the return of their ships, but has not actually threatened military action. 3 minor species have applied for human protection from aggressive neighbors. Collins walked over to another display showing Earth itself. The planet looked different than it had just a few months ago. Massive construction projects had appeared seemingly overnight as human technology that had been hidden for decades finally came into the open. Orbital elevators reached up from every continent, while artificial islands covered the oceans. "How are the rehabilitation programs working?" "Better than expected, sir. Dr. Helen Murphy reports that most species forced into Military service by aggressive governments actually prefer peaceful occupations when given the choice. The former hegemony warriors we captured have shown particular interest in engineering and agricultural work. The rehabilitation facilities on Luna had been expanded several times in just a few weeks as more and more captured enemy personnel arrived. Instead of prisons, they were more like schools where people could learn new skills and discover what they actually wanted to do with their lives instead of fighting wars they never chose. Meanwhile, on the Galactic Council Station emergency, meetings ran continuously as representatives tried to understand what was happening. The chamber that had once been filled with confident leaders from powerful empires now contained nervous diplomats who spoke in whispers about human capabilities. Kethron, the Altarian delegate, stood before the assembled council with a report that made everyone uncomfortable. His blue skin looked pale, and his extra arms moved nervously as he spoke. In 6 weeks, humanity has effectively neutralized 3 of the galaxy's most powerful military forces, he announced. A hegemony empire has lost over 200 ships without being able to destroy a single human vessel. The collective slave fleets have been completely eliminated. The Alliance expansion fleet no longer exists. Commander Veltar the Crystal, being who had mocked human weakness just weeks earlier, sat quietly in his section. His translator had been reprogrammed to remove the arrogant tone it had used before because he could no longer afford to insult anyone who might have connections to Earth. What do we know about their actual military strength? Asked the representative from the Spiral Confederation. Zephani, the ancient keeper scholar, accessed data through her neural interface. Her species had been keeping records longer than most. Civilizations had existed, and she had been studying every piece of information about humans she could find. The situation is far worse than we initially understood, she reported. When humans first applied for council membership 50 years ago, they submitted technology samples for our evaluation. Our scientists classified their equipment as primitive because it appeared simple and inefficient compared to our own designs. What did we miss? Asked several voices at once. Everything, Zephani replied grimly. We evaluated human technology based on our own understanding of how things should work. We expected bigger weapons, more complex systems, and brute force approaches. Human technology is based on completely different principles that we did not recognize. She activated a holographic display showing human ship designs that had been captured by various intelligence services over the years. To most observers, they looked like basic vessels with simple weapons and standard engines. Their ships appear primitive because they are designed for efficiency rather than intimidation. A human frigate uses quantum manipulation to achieve the same results as our dreadnoughts, while using a fraction of the energy and resources. Their weapons do not destroy enemies. They relocate them, which requires technology we cannot even understand, let alone build. The chamber fell silent as representatives realized they had been completely wrong about human capabilities for 50 years. Species that had considered Earth a minor member of galactic civilization suddenly understood. They had been dealing with a power that could have conquered the entire galaxy whenever it chose to do so. Why did they hide their strength for so long? Asked the Zephyrian representative. They were not hiding anything, Zephani explained. They were deliberately limiting themselves to avoid disrupting galactic stability. Every human ship that participated in Council military operations was operating under severe restrictions designed to prevent accidental revelations of their true capabilities. On Earth, President Nancy Clark held a meeting with the leaders of every human government to discuss the new situation. The small conference room in Geneva contained representatives from colonies scattered across dozens of star systems as they planned humanity's next moves. The galaxy is responding faster than we expected, reported Admiral Morrison, who had returned from his mission to the Council. 47 species have requested diplomatic contact in the past week. 12 governments have offered complete surrender in exchange for protection from their enemies. What about resistance? Asked President Clark. Minimal so far. Most aggressive species are too busy trying to figure out how we defeated them to plan counterattacks. The few that have tried to organize resistance movements have found their communications monitored and their weapons mysteriously malfunctioning whenever they try to use them. Defense Minister Carl Wright brought up a holographic map showing human influence spreading throughout the galaxy. Green areas indicated regions where human forces were actively maintaining peace, while yellow zones showed places where diplomatic contact had been established. We control or influence approximately 30% of inhabited space already, he reported. Not through conquest, but through invitation. Species are asking us to take over responsibility for their defense because they trust us more than their own governments. What about the remaining 70%? Most are waiting to see what happens next. A few isolated regions have not heard the news yet. Only about 5% are actively hostile, and even they are not taking military action against us. President Clark studied the map carefully. Humanity had spent 50 years learning about galactic civilization while secretly developing technology that made them the most powerful force in known space. Now they faced the question of what to do with that power. The cabinet has voted to proceed with the Reconstruction Initiative, she announced. Any species that chooses to cooperate will receive access to our technology and help building peaceful societies. Those that refuse will be contained but not harmed. Admiral Morrison nodded approvingly. The galaxy has been locked in cycles of violence for thousands of years because most species never learned that cooperation works better than competition. We can teach them better ways to live, and if they do not want to learn, then we will. Protect their victims until they change their minds, Morrison replied simply. As human forces continued their systematic approach to ending galactic conflicts, the true scope of Earth's capabilities began to emerge. What had seemed like a sudden reveal of hidden technology was actually humanity operating at a small fraction of their real potential. The galaxy was about to learn just how much humans had been holding back. Dr. Helen Murphy stood in her laboratory on Mars, giving a presentation to the reformed Galactic Council through quantum communication. Behind her, the red planet's surface showed massive construction projects that had appeared almost overnight. Entire cities now covered areas that had been empty desert just months ago. The Council has requested detailed information about human technological capabilities. Dr. Murphy began. She was a tall woman with short gray hair who had led Earth's secret research programs for over 20 years. In the interest of future cooperation, we are prepared to share some basic specifications. The holographic display showed a simple diagram of a human frigate like the ones that had defeated the hegemony fleet. To most observers, it still looked like a basic design with standard components. Our patrol vessels, which you have seen in recent operations, use what we classify as Level 3 technology, she explained. These ships are designed for police actions and humanitarian missions where minimal force is required. The display changed to show progressively more advanced ship designs. Each one looked more complex and powerful than the last, but even the most advanced designs maintained the clean, simple lines that characterized human engineering. Level 7 technology represents our current military standard for serious conflicts. Level 10 represents our cutting-edge experimental systems currently in testing phases. Our theoretical research extends to Level 20, with some concepts reaching even higher classifications. Commander Veltar the Zephyrian, who had once mocked human capabilities, now spoke with a trembling voice that his translator could barely process. What level technology was used to defeat our fleet? Level 2, Dr. Murphy replied without any emotion. We specifically downgraded our weapon systems to minimize the risk of accidental casualties or permanent damage to your vessels. The silence in the council chamber was so complete that the background hum of life support systems seemed loud. Representatives from hundreds of species tried to process the idea that humanity had defeated the galaxy's most powerful military forces using technology they considered outdated. President Nancy Clark joined the presentation from the White House. On Earth, the building behind her looked the same as always, but careful observers could see new technologies integrated seamlessly into the old architecture. The Sol Defense Force has completed its initial objectives, she announced. Aggressive civilizations have been neutralized or are currently in rehabilitation programs. Slave populations totaling over 3 billion individuals have been liberated and relocated to safe worlds. Major trade routes are now secure from piracy and military interference. She paused to let the numbers sink in. 3 billion people freed from slavery represented more individuals than many entire species had in their populations. The logistics of such an operation should have taken decades, but humans had accomplished it in a matter of weeks. However, our analysis indicates that the galaxy's current political structure is fundamentally unsustainable, President Clark continued. Too many species are locked in cycles of violence because they have never been shown alternatives. We are prepared to offer a different path forward. The display shifted to show construction projects throughout human space that defied everything the galaxy thought they knew about engineering. Entire solar systems were being converted into research facilities and industrial complexes. Artificial planets appeared in empty space, while existing worlds were reshaped to support massive populations. We call it the Reconstruction Initiative, President Clark explained. Every species that chooses to participate will receive access to Level 5 human technology. This includes systems that can eliminate scarcity, solve energy problems, cure all known diseases, and extend lifespans indefinitely. The implications hit the Council representatives like a physical blow. Most galactic civilizations still struggled with basic problems like feeding their populations and finding enough energy to power their societies. Humans were offering to solve all of these issues permanently. "What do you require in return?" asked Kethron, the Altarian delegate. "Only that participating species abandon military aggression and commit to working toward galactic cooperation," President Clark replied. "We are not interested in ruling other civilizations or taking their resources. We simply want everyone to have the opportunity to build peaceful, prosperous societies." Admiral Morrison appeared on screen from a space station orbiting Jupiter. That was larger than most moons. The structure had not existed a month ago, but now housed millions of people from dozens of different species working together on projects that seemed impossible. "For those governments that refuse our offer, we will continue our current approach," he said calmly. "Non-lethal neutralization of military forces, rehabilitation of aggressive individuals, and protection of civilian populations. This is not conquest or punishment. Think of it as gardening on a galactic scale." A camera pulled back to show the true size of the Jupiter station. It stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, with docking bays that could handle ships the size of small cities. Construction ships worked, constantly expanding the facility, while transport vessels arrived every few minutes carrying people and supplies from across the galaxy. "I do not understand," said the representative from the Hegemony Empire, who had replaced War Chief Grozak. "Your technology could have conquered the galaxy at any time. Why did you wait so long to reveal it?" Dr. Murphy smiled for the first time during the presentation. "Because conquest was never our goal. We spent 50 years studying galactic civilization and learning about every species and culture. We wanted to understand what was causing the constant conflicts before we tried to fix them." The display showed statistical analyses of galactic society that covered thousands of years of history. Charts and graphs revealed patterns of behavior that explained why certain species became aggressive while others remained peaceful. Most military conflicts result from artificial scarcity and competition for limited resources, she explained. Species fight over planets' minerals and energy because they believe these things are rare and valuable. Our technology makes all of these resources abundant and essentially free. You are saying you can eliminate the causes of war? Asked the Keeper Representative Zephani. We are saying we have already begun eliminating them, President Clark replied. Every species that joins the Reconstruction Initiative will have access to molecular assemblers that can create any material they need from basic elements. Fusion reactors will provide unlimited clean energy. Medical systems will eliminate disease and extend healthy lifespans to thousands of years. Admiral Morrison gestured toward the work going on around the Jupiter station. The real change is not technological, though. It is philosophical. When people have everything they need, they stop fighting over scraps and start working together to build something better. The presentation concluded with an offer that would reshape galactic civilization. Any species could join the Reconstruction Initiative immediately and begin receiving human technology and assistance. Those that chose to remain independent would be left alone as long as they did not threaten others. We will give you time to consider our proposal, President Clark said. In the meantime, human forces will continue to maintain peace throughout the galaxy. We invite any representatives who wish to visit our facilities and see the technology in action. After the communication ended, representatives sat in shocked silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Humanity had not just revealed superior technology, they had offered to share it freely with anyone willing to embrace peace. The galaxy had feared Earth's military might, but instead discovered Earth's infinite capacity for hope and generosity. The question now was whether other species would be wise enough to accept what was being offered, or foolish enough to continue fighting wars they could never win. 6 months after humanity stopped playing rough, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. What had been a collection of warring civilizations locked in endless cycles of violence had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Species that had fought each other for thousands of years now worked together on projects that seemed like magic to their ancestors. Ambassador Claire Davis stood on the observation deck of the massive space station that served as headquarters for the new Galactic Cooperation Council. The structure was larger than most planets and maintained perfect environmental conditions for over 300 different species. Through the transparent walls, she could see ships from every corner of the galaxy, arriving and departing as representatives came to participate in the new system of government. Today marks the 6-month anniversary of the Reconstruction Initiative. Ambassador Davis announced to the packed assembly hall, unlike the old Galactic Council, where species had been forced to participate through military pressure or economic necessity, every representative here had chosen to join because they wanted to build something better. The chamber itself demonstrated human engineering capabilities. Instead of the rigid seating arrangements of the old council, this space could reshape itself instantly to accommodate any number of species with different environmental needs. Gravity, temperature, and atmosphere adjusted automatically in each section, while universal translators made communication effortless. Former War Chief Grozek sat with the hegemony delegation, but his appearance had changed dramatically. The massive warrior who had once terrorized dozens of worlds now looked peaceful and thoughtful. His voice carried none of the rage that had once defined him when he stood to address the assembly. The human rehabilitation programs have helped. My people remember what we were before centuries of militarism consumed our culture, he said quietly. We had art, music, and philosophy that were suppressed because they were considered weak. Now we are rediscovering these treasures and finding joy in creation instead of destruction. The transformation of the hegemony exemplified humanity's approach to dealing with aggressive civilizations. Rather than punishment or conquest, humans had identified the root causes of militaristic behavior and helped entire species heal from generations of conditioning. Warriors became artists, engineers, and teachers when given the opportunity to choose their own paths. Dr. Kevin, right now director of the Galactic Science Consortium, presented the quarterly progress report from his laboratory on Europa. Behind him, holographic displays showed statistical data that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. 51 species have completed the transition to Level 5 technology, he announced. Scarcity has been completely eliminated in their territories. Average lifespans have increased by an average of 400%, and violent conflicts have dropped to zero across all participating civilizations. The numbers were staggering, but the real changes went far deeper than statistics could measure. Entire populations that had spent their lives struggling for basic survival now had the freedom to pursue knowledge, art, and personal fulfillment. Children grew up learning cooperation instead of competition, while adults discovered talents they never knew they possessed. More importantly, we are seeing unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for millennia, Dr. Wright continued. The Vithera and Zephyrians, who fought 3 devastating wars over mining rights, are now collaborating on joint research projects that make those resources completely obsolete. Commander Veltar nodded agreement from his place in the Zephyrian section. The crystal being who had once mocked human weakness now spent his time studying human philosophy and working with former enemies on peaceful projects. Human technology does not just solve problems, he explained. It makes the problems irrelevant. Why fight over planets when you can build better worlds from empty space? Why compete for energy when fusion reactors can power entire civilizations forever? President Nancy Clark appeared via quantum communication from Earth, which had itself been transformed into a garden world after most industrial production was moved to artificial planets. The blue and green sphere behind her looked more beautiful than ever as massive cities blended seamlessly with restored natural environments. The most important change has not been technological, she said. It has been philosophical. Every species in the Cooperation Council has discovered that their best qualities were being suppressed by artificial scarcity and enforced competition. The truth of her words was visible throughout the station. Species that had been taught to hate each other now worked together as friends. Former soldiers became teachers, while weapons designers created art. Children from different worlds played together while their parents collaborated on projects that benefited everyone. Admiral Morrison, now retired from military service and working as a cultural liaison, smiled as he joined the presentation from his home on Luna. The moon had been converted into a vast park where people from hundreds of species came to relax and learn about each other's cultures. 50 years ago, when humanity first encountered galactic civilization, we faced a difficult choice, he explained. We could have used our superior technology to conquer and dominate, or we could wait and hope for a better solution. We chose patience. The final display showed the galaxy's current state compared to 6 months earlier. Instead of scattered warring civilizations, the map now showed interconnected networks of cooperation spanning thousands of light years. Trade had been replaced by sharing, while military fleets had been converted to exploration and research vessels. We warned the galaxy that we were holding back, Admiral Morrison continued. What we did not mention was that we were also holding back our compassion, our desire to help, and our dream of what civilization could become when everyone has enough. The camera pulled back to show the massive space station surrounded by ships from hundreds of species, all working together on humanity's next great project. Construction vessels were building something that dwarfed even the Cooperation Council headquarters, while transport ships carried materials and personnel from across the galaxy. What you see under construction is the first galactic gateway, Dr. Wright explained. When completed, it will allow instantaneous travel to other galaxies, where we hope to spread the same message of cooperation and peace. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not content with transforming one galaxy. They planned to carry their philosophy of cooperation to every corner of the universe. The gateway would open pathways to civilizations that had never imagined peaceful coexistence was possible. Will there be resistance in other galaxies? Asked a representative from the former Alliance territories. Almost certainly, President Clark replied. But we have learned that every species wants the same basic things: safety for their families, enough resources to live comfortably, and the freedom to pursue their dreams. When we can provide these things, most conflicts resolve themselves. The meeting concluded with plans for the next phase of galactic development. Exploration fleets would map uninhabited star systems, while construction teams built new worlds for growing populations. Research stations would push the boundaries of science, while cultural centers preserved and celebrated the diversity of galactic civilization. As representatives dispersed to their ships and homes throughout the galaxy, they carried with them the knowledge that they were part of something unprecedented in cosmic history. The galaxy had learned to fear Earth's military power, but instead discovered humanity's infinite capacity for hope and their unwavering belief that cooperation was always possible. In the distance, the gateway construction continued as humanity prepared to carry their message to the stars beyond. The galaxy had tried to dismiss humans as weak and primitive, but instead found teachers who showed them how to build paradise among the stars. What had begun as a warning about human military capabilities had become a lesson about the power of patience, wisdom, and the unshakable human conviction that everyone deserves a chance to be better than they are.